Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show. As first responders, we risk our lives every day. Our financial security is under attack. Our pensions are in a state of emergency. A single on-duty incident can alter or erase our earning potential instantly and forever. We are the heroes of society. We are self-reliant and we need to take care of our own financial future. The Heroic Investing Show is our toolkit of business and investing tactics on our mission to financial freedom.
Hey, we always get great feedback from you whenever we do client case studies, and so we really appreciate volunteers like our guest today, Andrew Freitas, who's with us. He's got 7 properties. He lives in Vancouver, Washington, and has been working with one of our investment counselors, and really just a pleasure to have him on the show. Andrew, welcome. How are you?
I'm quite well. Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Good. It's good to have you. So, maybe we'll start at kind of the beginning. First off, what attracted you to real estate investing?
I've always kind of known that real estate would be something that I would want some vehicle to pursue, for income. My parents told me, they even owned a business when I was growing up, a little coffee shop. And they told me that even with that for 15 years or so, the only money they ever made was actually owning their own houses and having them appreciate and then selling them and moving somewhere else. And they were very lucky in their life of some good appreciating markets that they happened to be moving into at the time. Then they had a rental property for a while, and they were of the old style of letting the property pay itself off, and just have it be free and clear. And it worked well for them. It worked fine. And again, that's the money in their life that they've made, even though they've worked really hard and been diligent workers. Their actual income or wealth has been because of real estate. And so I was never really afraid of real estate as a thing. My brother also has in this area remodeled houses. He's bought his own places and remodeled them, flipped them, and done the work himself, and also done some buy and hold stuff. So I knew real estate. I was never afraid of real estate as a thing. It was never it didn't feel like a risk to me as a concept, as a vehicle for wealth. So yeah, that's kind of how I, as a child or as a kid even, was not afraid of it.
Good stuff. Just to mention something on that, you talked about your parents and the business they owned and, how really the money they made was on real estate. And you made me think of something, a friend of mine who had a very wealthy parents. He said to me something interesting. And, I'm not really a fan of commercial real estate mostly. I think housing is really the key, single family homes being my favorite, apartments being my second favorite, mobile home parks also good. But housing, right? Not office space or retail so much. You can make money in anything, but I just think the housing asset's the best. I said to him, how'd your dad get so successful? What's his secret sauce in business? And he said, interestingly, he didn't really make his money from the businesses. He just made his money from all the real estate the businesses occupied. I thought that was interesting. The business kind of just becomes the tenant, right? And it pays the mortgage, but it's really the properties that made the money. And then, they purchased a whole bunch of houses and did stuff outside the businesses directly too. So I thought that was sort of an interesting aside.
Yeah. And my parents never owned the commercial properties that their coffee shops were in. That was never probably even in their thoughts at the time, Yeah. But they certainly, the home they lived in, it was nice,
Yeah.
And again, that's, as you talk about, that's kind of the icing on the cake. And for them, it just happened. They just luck of the draw year after year. They kept getting in the right markets. What can I say?
Yeah. And you live near the place where they pretty much invented coffee in America. So
yeah, quite a lot up here. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Good stuff. When did you discover the Creating Wealth podcast?
I lived over in Sweden for about 7 years. My wife is from Sweden, and 2009, I was painting my roof. Their metal roofs over there. Sometimes you got to paint them. And I was a do-it-yourselfer kind of a guy. So I was up on my roof, scraping off paint and paint. I had downloaded or had ripped some CDs that I had of real estate investing prior to this onto an MP3 player. And it was 2009. And my friend had just gotten the first iPhone in the States, and he sent me his iPod Touch. So I had this new cool device that I don't even know if it was available in my town in Sweden, up in the north of Sweden. And so I kind of got podcasts, iTunes and all that kind of stuff. And so I was looking for something else to listen to, real estate. I was listening to the real estate thing, and I was like, So I discovered you through searching on the, whatever it is, iTunes store, whatever it is now, the podcast, and just, I had heard a couple different ones, and what you were talking about just resonated with me. And so that was the first.
That's great.
Yeah. I don't even know what number of episodes you were back in 2009, but I think it was probably still in the double digits, maybe in the low 100s by then.
Yeah, in 2009, I don't know either offhand, but we have a lot more episodes now. So you discovered us about 12 years ago then. Mm-hmm. How long did you listen to the podcast before, reaching out and becoming a client?
Yeah, so I kind of did off and on, kind of had some periods of time where I just wasn't listening to anything. I was doing, hunker down, nose to the grind, doing my own stuff. And I think 2013 was when I attended Meet the Masters, and it was in Irvine. And, if I'm just being transparent, I thought it was a cool event, but I don't know, maybe I just wasn't ready for it, Mm-hmm. I kind of knew that was still a vehicle. The concepts you were talking about so certainly resonated with me. I thought Platinum Properties, Jason Hartman, I thought that was the way to go, but I was like, I'm not quite ready yet, maybe that was just a risk thing. I was nervous about jumping in the pool. Who knows? But 2013 was my first event with you. And I enjoyed it. It was nice mm-hmm. getting out of the gloomy Pacific Northwest in January as well. Get down to Irvine.
Coming down to Southern California.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That wasn't a bad thing. But then in 2016, December of 16 is when I bought my first property through you all. And that was my first investment property. And then I bought one in 17, then one in 18. And then I had cashed out a retirement plan because I was working for the local county here, and I had some sort of vested retirement plan kind of thing. And I was like, this is ridiculous. They decided to protect people and start choosing what investments you could and couldn't do, and taking a portion of your investments and making it less risky. And I'm like, I just want to go all in. I'm not a conservative investor in that way. If it's going to be something that I don't have control over or something that I can't touch or whatever, I want to just go full bore and as much as possible. And so I was kind of disappointed with that. So I decided to cash it out and take the hit on the taxes and the hit on the withdrawal, penalty.
So that was a retirement plan. Now, mm-hmm. taking the hit on the withdrawal penalty, paying the tax, mm-hmm. in hindsight, was that a good decision?
Oh, geez, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So you made more on the income properties through our network than you lost on paying that tax and penalty.
Yeah. And that's because of the stuff that you talk about a lot. Yes, there was cash on cash that was great, but there was also depreciation, writing stuff off your taxes. So, the overall return on investment has been phenomenal. I probably should have done it earlier,
mm-hmm.
but it was what it was. Yeah. So I bought, like I said, I bought one in 16, one in 17. And then because I cashed that out, I bought one in 18, and I cashed out at the very beginning of 19. And of 19. And I bought 3 properties in 2019. And then last year I didn't buy any properties. And then I just closed on my 7th one in January, just this January.
Fantastic. And you were kind enough to do a surprise testimonial video for us. We sent out a link where people could give us a review. What I loved about yours is you were standing in, I guess, an office room in your home, and you had all of our property tracker performas on your wall behind you of your properties. Yeah. I just love that.
I think it's good to have, for me anyway, to have visual reminders of things like that. It's really mm-hmm. important to say, this is, a goal of mine. I need to present this in front of me. And it's been kind of fun, to have that visual reminder. And, even though I'm not, I wouldn't say super far along in real estate journey by any means, it's fun to kind of see that wall slowly grow,
Yeah, that's great. So more posters on the wall mean more income for you, right?
Yeah. Means closer to the goal. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Andrew, tell us a little bit about what you do for a living, if you care to share it. Sure. We talked off air about it, and I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm a nurse. I actually got my nursing license over in Sweden initially, even though I'm from the Pacific Northwest here. And now I work in a psychiatric hospital here in the greater Portland metropolitan area. Yeah, I really love it. It's fun to work with people and to help people. And, sometimes it's exhausting mental work, working with people always is, but it's really rewarding. And I think the team that I work with certainly makes it so much better. It's the people you work with really make or break, the work that you do. So,
Sure they do. What I didn't know, which you mentioned, is your facility is an emergency psychiatric mm-hmm. facility.
Yeah.
I sort of never even considered there was such a thing, but given going on in the world the past year, maybe can you share some things with our listeners? Of course, not confidential things, but just in general, what's happening to people out there?
Yeah, as you know, it's been a very, very rough year for most of the people in the United States and many people around the world, of course, too. And folks who would normally be able to check in with their therapist or psychiatrist or whatever it would be along the way have been bumped into the Zoom world And that's very hard sometimes to not have that human contact, and very hard to not, it's just a different relation, a relationship is very different over the web than it is in person. And I think a lot of people kind of fell off, a pathway they were already on that was kind of a supportive structure for them, and got into the Zoom world, and it begins falling apart for them. And when the, mental health starts falling apart for them, the rest of their world starts falling apart. And so I think we've seen a lot of that, I think, over the last year. Folks who otherwise would never probably need a psychiatric emergency department seek help and service because they're in crisis.
How about, you deal with, sadly, suicide attempts and things like that.
Sure.
Have you seen, maybe just anecdotally, because I know empirically there has been an increase given what's going on, but anecdotally, what have you seen? What can you tell us?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have, honestly. Again, we've been a psychiatric hospital there. I've been working there almost 3 years. And so that's always been a daily part of the work, so I haven't really noticed there being someday I don't deal with somebody who's suicidal, and some days I do. Every single day there's somebody I'm working with who is struggling with thoughts of suicide. And that's just, I'm glad the hospital's there for them. What can I say? Yeah.
Sure. Here's kind of a superstitious aside, and I don't know if you have anything to say about this, but you just made me think of it. For years, I've heard about these possible wives' tales about the moon cycle, right? And I'm just curious, do people talk about that in your profession?
The classic lunar
have more issues, and
the classic the moon's out. That's a lunatic, right? The idea of that.
Oh, that's where the word comes from. I never even thought.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. I mean, it's funny when there is an odd day, people say, "Oh, it's a full moon," So that I don't know if it's superstitious, but it's ironic and it's funny, and sometimes it does seem to line up with that. But again, we have days that are less crisis than other days, it feels like. And they're not always lining up with the lunar cycle that I'm aware of.
We've all heard those things that, emergency rooms fill up on full moon nights, and DUIs increase and all this kind of stuff. I just was kind of wondering. I thought I'd just ask that as an aside.
I haven't noticed it, Jason, but it's entirely possible.
Yeah. In terms of real estate, where are your properties?
So the first one I bought was in Montgomery, Alabama, and that was, again, back in 2016. I think you guys were in that market really briefly, and then it just didn't quite work out. The relationship with the provider over there was kind of fell apart.
Yeah, we didn't like that provider too much, but, we've had some bumps in the road. I hope you weren't one of them. Some have worked out fine.
As Sarah said, I got in and I got a good one. So that was great. So I had my first one there, and then you all were no longer in that market or recommending that market just because the relationship, the inventory, whatever wasn't there. And so I moved down to Jackson, Mississippi for the next 5 properties. Yeah, down there. And those are primarily in Jackson, and one of them's in Clinton, which is just a suburb of Jackson. And that's probably been my best property has been that Clinton, Mississippi property. It's been really good. And then the last one I bought here in January, I was back in Montgomery. I figured I'd start trying to maximize my relationship with the management company there. And so, I want to get, a few more at least in Montgomery before I move to a third market.
Right. Great. So you're in 2 markets now then, right?
Yeah.
Good stuff. And so your first one was 5 years ago. Now you're up to 7 properties. Share some of the experiences or, lessons learned, good things, bad things, whatever you want to share. And also, I also want to ask, are there any tools you're using, whether it be software or ideas or contractors or just, anything like that, without giving out necessarily names?
Yeah, totally understood. Yeah, I've tried to let the professionals that I'm recommended by or to be the professionals. So I work a lot. I work a lot of hours. I work a lot of overtime. So my ability to really engage in the day-to-day kind of stuff has really been limited, and I don't have a desire to do that yet either. I have a desire to really let the management companies kind of run those pieces and just monitor the management companies, and if things don't look right on the page, I ask a lot of questions, So for me, I don't want to be more engaged right now in day-to-day stuff with the properties. Someday I will, but at this point, I'm working a lot right now. I'm enjoying the work that I'm doing, and my focus is on the work that I'm doing, and I'll let my business be the business, but let the professionals be the professionals and do that part for me. And it's been an okay thing. It's not been perfect like anything, like you always say too. It's not a perfect thing, but it's certainly better than everything else. And it has been so far. Some of the stuff, in that first Montgomery house that I bought back in 2016, that one had 2 kind of bad tenants in a row. That's always tough. Thankfully, like I mentioned kind of before, I've always been just convinced that real estate was the vehicle anyway. So it didn't derail me at all. It got discouraged. Who wants to pay out money rather than receive money? But it didn't derail my plans at all. And I knew that was a part of the business at times too. And unfortunately I hit that kind of in the first year of couple couple rough tenants who and they didn't destroy the place, but they left it very dirty and filled with junk. And, there's costs involved in that turn, and that wasn't very fun because the profits were shot for the year. But still, it's been a good ride so far. One of the things that you mentioned this too, being able, paying attention to the management companies. That was one of the things and that particular property that I'm mentioning there, went over to a national company for management after the particular company that I originally bought it from and had managing it transferred all of their properties over to this national company as well. I just went along for the ride on that one. And that was dumb. That shouldn't have happened for me because they didn't actually even have an office in Montgomery. And so how can you pay attention to a property or that if you're not even like geographically located there? So that was a little rough. And I think I got a little burned on that one, but learned a lesson, and then got a local company there that's been great so far. I've been enjoying it. Yeah, they've been really on top of it.
So are you, really looking at your property management statements every month? And it sounds like you're holding the managers to account if something doesn't look right, if, you're concerned that you're paying for stuff you don't need to pay for, sure, or, costs are too high, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about costs are too high because I don't know enough yet in those markets what things, cost. Like for doing stuff on my own home here in Washington, I do a lot of my own construction work. I do a lot of my own repairs and those kind of things. So for me, things are, the cost of materials and a little bit of my time. So I don't really know what the market costs are for a lot of things, just to be honest with you. But it's interesting, with real estate, you don't a lot of times know if something's happening until after it happens. And you get the statement at the end of the month and you're kind of like, oh, I'm having a conversation after the fact, which isn't always the best time to have a conversation, but you don't always know about the information or the situation in the moment that it's happening. There's been a couple times where like a larger expense is coming up and right away, the management company lets you know right away, hey, there's something that's going on here that we need to have sussed out and see what the repairs are going to be. But for the most part, it hasn't been too bad. Sometimes I'll see like, oh, somebody didn't pay. And I will call the management company and like, what's going on? Tell me about this, what have your action steps been since, this has been going on for a month, rather than like, oh, what are we going to do now? Because their job is to know in the moment and to be responding to things in the moment.
Yeah. The thing I always have noticed and I say is that, even when you have an expense that's a surprise or, a manager who's a little too liberal on the spending money, right? Mm-hmm. It's still better than those Wall Street investments where you just don't know what's going on. I mean, here you notice it, but there, you just get your return at the end of the deal or along the way, right? And you look at your stock portfolio and you have no control over what they're spending. You have no control over whether, like Intel, for example, just got nailed with, I think, a $2.1 billion patent infringement lawsuit or something like that. I just read about that. Yeah. And, that affects all the shareholders. If you own stock in Wells Fargo and they got like a scandal every week there, and they're getting fined by the government, they're paying these giant fines to the SEC. Yeah. It doesn't really affect, at least not very much, the executives. It affects the shareholders. They pay a bill for that stuff.
Right. The regular person on the street.
So unfair. Yeah.
One of the other things too is aside from being just, a frivolous expense that nothing's done on, if there's an expense, you're still improving your property. So it's almost like the money is still going back into the investment, which even though it doesn't feel good, like I said earlier, to pay money, it's much better to receive money than it is to pay it. But it's still, there's some comfort in knowing that the money's going into your investment rather than just loss, which it is in the Wall Street side.
That's a good point. A few people think of it that way. So when you get an expense, at least you're not paying for the executives and their private jets, and you're not paying for corruption necessarily. Sometimes you might, but you got to watch that, obviously. But the ability for a property manager to be corrupt is dramatically lower than it is for a CEO or a fund manager to be corrupt, right?
I would expect so. I mean, again, the degrees of separation are much farther with the Wall Street, scenario, where I'm a phone call away from my management person.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Yeah. Any other experiences or tools you want to share? Anything people can learn from? Any tool?
Yeah, I've just noticed like my first house that I bought in Montgomery, Alabama it was probably a C-class property, right? I know you've talked about, try to stay away from the C-class properties and get into the B-class and the A-class properties, just a lot less work, a lot less trouble, better tenants, all that kind of stuff. And it's true. I can't say that it's not true. I probably was a little excited back in 2016 about the pro forma and the, the starry-eyed gains of cash on cash, So every one of my properties, interestingly enough, every one of my properties has been increasingly more and more expensive as I've gone along. So the first property I bought
in other words, you're buying more expensive properties.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Now is that due to the appreciation that's been happening, or are you up leveling the quality of your properties?
I think it's just been up leveling the quality, honestly. Yeah. There's been definitely the last year particularly has been an incredible amount of appreciation, but I've only bought one property, but again, the first one I bought was like 68,500, right? And rents were 825, which is phenomenal. It was great. And when they're paying, it's great, right? That's a phenomenal cash flow. But again, the level of tenant can be one who, leaves without paying and causes a more expensive turn, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
But the last property I just bought was like 131.9. So still a relatively inexpensive property.
Yeah, that's really inexpensive.
And that's in Montgomery as well, in a different Montgomery. Not sure what the cash flow is going to be on that one. Probably really close to $200, maybe just a hair over $200 with all the, incidental in. But still, I can't get that on Wall Street consistently year after year after year. There's no way, there's no way. Maybe in a boom year, right? But there's no way I can do that otherwise. And
that boom can retrace and go backwards very quickly on Wall Street.
It can sink real quick.
Yeah, with the real estate, it's just not that volatile, so that's a lot better.
Yeah, so it's been good, I think I remember one of your guys who lives in Augustine, who's kind of a provider of newer construction out there. I can't remember his name. It was the surfer guy. Yep. He talked a lot about that too when at the Meet the Masters, I think in 2018 or 2017. I went to both of those as well. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the speakers, and he was talking about how he went from a lot of properties that many of them were lower quality, lower price, to consolidating to fewer properties that were much more valuable properties. Still cash flowing, still a great investment. But I remember him talking about that transition, and that really resonated with me, just with my brief experience in the C-class property kind of game. In fact, getting up to the B class makes a lot of sense. So most of the properties are B class properties.
I agree. And, I think the thing I want to just say about that again, so everybody knows, is look, you can make money in anything. Okay. You can make money in F class properties or A class properties, right? But we find that for the tolerance of most of our clientele is that they like the better properties. They just have better experiences with them on the whole. There are certainly those out there who are kind of the bargain hunters that want those El Cheapo properties. They've got great numbers on paper, and if they pay more attention to them, they can work. They can do great with them. But by and large, the A and B class properties tend to work out better at least for our people, we find.
Yeah. I've done a little bit of them. I can't remember all of it right now, but I think they're pretty close to each other. They're pretty neck, the B class properties and the C class properties right now. But again, I think I went into real estate investing already knowing that it was the vehicle I wanted to do. So the difficulties that a C class present is not something that I was like afraid of. I wasn't worried about the tenant who's going to trash my property. I was never afraid of that. I don't mean that in a bad way. Just I was always exposed to real estate, from a younger age too. So there was no hindrance or barrier for me to get into real estate and to be worried about those properties. Sure. And I'll be honest, I talk with a lot of folks too at work. A lot of nurses who are in the place where they have some expendable cash. They could probably get into real estate investing too if they want to. And I certainly promote this style of investing. I enjoy it, and it makes a lot of sense to me, and it's been well for me. I always tell them too, that there's risk, but the people that work with, the people on your team that I've worked with, you, Sarah, the folks that I've connected with at the meetings that you have, the events that you have, the
conferences, sure.
and all the management companies and that too, everybody is a professional. Sometimes the management companies don't do a good enough job, and you decide if you want to stick with them and, hope they get better or change that. But it's not like I'm working with a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing.
Right.
That's what's so comforting. You know what I mean? It's like going in with novices, you're like, but going with somebody who's been doing it for a long time and understands the questions to ask, it just takes so much for me, the risk also away, just dealing with people who this is what they do all day long. The mortgage people, the buyer's broker in the market, all of those things. They're just all professionals. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. Thank you for that, by the way. That's a compliment to us, obviously. And, I'll tell you, Andrew, that's the reason I got into this business back in 2003, 2004. It's because I tried to do this myself, and it was so difficult. I mean, I had been in traditional real estate all my life up until that point. Right. And then I tried to become a nationwide investor. I couldn't get return phone calls. I was flying around the country. I was meeting with people who didn't know anything about investing. A lot of them were just a bunch of schlocks, frankly, or worse. They could be just really sleazy and unethical too. I thought we have the greatest investment of all. And yet there is no easy system to take advantage of it for people. I thought there's got to be a business here. So I basically became my own first customer and created the business out of that. So it was out of necessity, that's kind of what entrepreneurs do. They notice a need and a hole in the marketplace and then they fill it, so I know what you mean.
They have a vision for it. Yeah. They have a vision for it and they make it happen. So that's great. Yeah.
Totally understand what you're saying there because
I've always been kind of a nuts and bolts kind of a guy. So like, you have people who envision this. Oh, there's a problem. I see this. I envision a solution for this problem. I've always been the one who said, okay, tell me what your solution is. Let me make it happen. I've always been kind of like that guy. I'm just not a visionary thinker, and it is what it is. But definitely, a rubber meets the road. How's that going to get done? That's pretty much what I've done. And so again, having your system already in place was perfect for me. I don't need to envision a new pathway. I say, oh, that makes great. Or that's a great pathway. Let's just make that happen. So,
yeah, fantastic. Hey, I'm curious, where in Sweden did you live?
So I was 2 years down in Stockholm when my wife and we lived down there for 2 years. And then when we were going to have our son, we moved up to the north of Sweden. It's Piteå, Sweden, which is pretty far north overall. Not quite as far north as where you were in the Ice Hotel, which I've visited before.
Right, yeah. But that was such a neat trip.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing up there, honestly. Yeah. So it's about a 5-hour drive south of that, which is still very far up, probably about an hour and a half drive south of the Arctic Circle, roughly.
Wow.
I was moving there for about 5 years. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I shoveled a lot of snow in my life.
Yeah. I couldn't do that, but for some it works. Good stuff. Well, anything else you want to say to wrap it up? Do you have any questions about any of the, the techniques that we teach or anything that you want to talk through real quick?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the questions side of things, to be honest with you. I don't think I have a whole lot of questions right now. I again, when I have questions, I just reach out to Sarah or somebody at the team, and usually they know exactly what I'm talking about and can answer it really quickly. So
good stuff.
Yeah. One of the things I did mention, though, I think that was kind of cool, was that the whole business that you have, there's a referral business. It's a business that, connects, buyers and sellers and that. And I just remember one time, Sarah, my investment counselor, told me not to invest in a particular property that I thought was very interesting to me. She's like, just matching you up with that particular seller wouldn't be a good idea. They don't match your style. And that was interesting. And I was glad that she gave me that feedback, and she was right, but, as an investor, you don't have the relationship with the seller, ahead of time, which is what you guys also do too. So that was just kind of an interesting aside to all of this too, steering you in the right direction, but also steering you away from the wrong direction, which was very helpful. Yeah,
that's great to hear. And I certainly take a long-term view of business, and I hope all of our team members always do. We really don't hire salespeople. We hire counselors who really take a long-term view and want to make sure clients have good experiences. They hopefully are always doing the right thing for them. And, we just did a survey, and I can't wait to read we do an annual survey, and I can't wait to read all the results. I skimmed over some of them yesterday, and they all looked pretty good. So
I filled mine out, Jason.
So you did? Okay, good. Well, I'll look forward to seeing yours too. Good stuff.
It's in there somewhere. Yeah.
Good stuff. Cool. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your story with us on behalf of all the listeners, because everybody really appreciates these client case studies, and we appreciate your business, and just want to wish you a very happy investing journey. And again, thanks for coming on the show and sharing your experiences.
Yeah, thanks. I hope in some small way this encourages other folks who haven't gone this route to jump in, because it's been great. Thank you so much.
It will. Thanks again. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.